Welcome to Building Healthy Relationships, the 4 Habits podcast, helping you enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Andrea and Jon Taylor-Cummings, recognized authorities on the subjects of improving work relationships and cultures, as well as couple and home relationships.
Well, hello and a warm welcome to our audience around the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for tuning in, whatever time it is for you. And today we're in conversation with Alisa Grafton. Welcome, Alisa.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you very much, Jon.
We're so looking forward to this conversation and all the insights you have around professional relationships and the importance now. But to give you a due recognition, Jon's going to share the background with everybody.
Absolutely. Great context here. Okay, so Alisa Grafton delivers keynotes and masterclasses on networking, interpersonal relationship building skills for Generation Z or Generation Z in the workplace, and connection making between generations. She is the author of the Business Book Awards 2023 finalist, Great Networking, The Art and Practice of Building Authentic Professional Relationships. Dr. Ivan Misner, who is the founder of BNI, the world's largest business referral network, as I understand it, and he's also a New York Times bestselling author, he called it the book on 21st century thinking behind professional relationships. That's the book. Alisa has been continually practicing law for nearly 25 years, for the last 12 years as a partner and consultant in the City of London and West End firms. And as a leader, she fully embraces the challenges and the opportunities presented by the modern multi-generational workforce. And we're going to be looking forward to unpacking a lot of that here. Relationships, how do they work? Really looking forward to this conversation.
I mean, there's so many directions we could take this, Alisa. And I love the fact we share this passion in the importance of the skill of interpersonal relationships, especially in the professional world, professional services world. But before we dive into that, help the audience, help us all understand a little bit more of your background and what kind of provoked this passion in you. And then we can talk about the wonderful work that you're doing.
Yes, of course, Andrea. So I have been now in the legal professional, in the legal world for nearly 25 years. Mm-hmm. And when I qualified sometime in very early 2000s, I realized that I think it was more instinctive choice, to be honest, than conscious at the time. But I realized that a part of my success, future success, would be developing professional relationships with my clients, potential clients, or generally people in the industry. So I made rather a purposeful approach in developing relationships with clients. So going to various networking meetings, using actually any opportunity to reinforce relationships with my established clients, but also to gain new contacts, to generally widen my profile, but also widen the range of contacts that I had in the industry and outside of the industry. And sometimes, of course, that would eat into the time that I actually had to do the work, or it meant that I would be staying out late in the evenings. And occasionally I questioned whether that was the right approach. Mm-hmm. But as the years progressed, I realized that it was paying off. But I don't think I fully appreciated the value of those connections until I decided to change firms shortly into the pandemic. And as the result of that decision, I started approaching my existing clients, asking them whether they wanted to transition with me to a different business. Obviously, it was somewhat of a nerve-wracking experience, and I wasn't sure how it was going to pan out. But to my huge gratitude and surprise, to a degree, many of my clients said, absolutely, we would love to follow you to your new firm. And that's just made me to step back a little bit and wanting to ask a very specific question of my clients, what made you to make the decision? And some of them shared with Well, because I sort of, obviously I wanted to flatter myself that I was the best of the best as a professional. But in fact, I think there was something else behind it. And when I asked some of my closest clients, they said, well, it's all about relationships.
Absolutely.
We value the brand, we value your technical, legal skills, but ultimately people work with people. And it is the relationship that we value. We know we can trust you. We, as a person as well as a professional, we know that we like you. And those two elements are actually paramount to our decision to continue working with you.
If we can just jump in there, Alisa, because that's such an important point. And it's almost as if to say technical skills are expected. That's the base level for them coming to you in the first place. But it's the relationship and the trust that they've built in that relationship with you, those interpersonal skills that really made the difference in who they decided to go to. And that's such a powerful point that COVID has helped us to understand it's really important for driving business, especially in professional services.
Absolutely. I wanted to pick up on that actually and just see for a moment, were you able to reflect on what you did in particular to develop those relationships? Were there a couple of things that you did, you now look back and go, actually, yeah, I did that, and that actually is what paid off? Any thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely. So I started exactly doing that. I started thinking back about all of those times when I was doubting my decision to take time away from my desk work, if you like, and when away from my then stationary phone.
Yep.
And, and actually take myself out into the wider world, combat those nerves when I was entering a room full of strangers without knowing anyone, presenting, exposing myself time and again to the new community, presenting myself. So, all of those experiences. And in fact, I reflected on them so deeply that I ended up writing a book.
Yes, hold this up. We want to see it. Great networking. Yes, definitely need our copy.
That you so kindly mentioned. So that was sort of, the brainchild of that.
Yes.
Brainstorming work, if you like. And so I also, as I was thinking about all of those elements, John, that you mentioned, I realized that, it's not a coincidence. It is a skill that can be learned. It is a skill that can be taught. And it is the skill that I now say, literally interpersonal skills or the development of interpersonal skills pays off quite literally.
Yeah.
So it's not, as you correctly, Andrea, said, technical skills in any profession is a given. You have to be good at your job.
Yeah.
But what I absolutely say with 100% of certainty is that soft skills, interpersonal skills, or vital skills, as we like to refer to them, are an essential element.
And, we're so on the same page with you. And the interesting thing is that up until now, nowhere are we taught intentionally how to do relationships well. And one of the things that COVID has done is it's forced us, especially in this remote working, hybrid working world that's become more of the norm, it's forced us to think about the things that would happen automatically when you're co-located in an office and become intentional about doing those things in building relationships across distance or in a hybrid setting or in a remote setting. What are some of the things that you found are the things that we need to become intentional about doing to build strong relationships, especially in professional services?
Well, absolutely. When you said that, you cannot believe that those essential skills, vital skills, are not being taught. I'm in absolute agreement with you. And in fact, I still cannot fathom the fact that those are not part of the curriculum, essential curriculum, in a lot of, higher education or sort of comprehensive education system.
Yeah.
And you are absolutely right, in my view, to say that COVID kind of exposed the need for those things. Now, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later on, but now that most of us work in some sort of flexible environments, if it's not fully remote, then it's a hybrid, we understand how much we gain from those water cooler moments.
Yeah. Exactly.
from kind of catching up with a colleague over coffee. And as much as I value the idea of connecting with people virtually, meeting people over virtual coffee, or, those video calls that present us with a chance to meet people, geographically in a wider locations, it simply does not replicate face-to-face communication, and especially so for the younger generation that are still getting to grips with what it means to build a relationship.
Yeah. That's so very well said, because we always say, invest in the relationship, go slow, invest in the relationship, so that when you need to get work done or you're working over video conference call, you can go fast and deal with the business stuff, because the foundation of a strong relationship is there. And I know you mentioned in our chat before the recording is that the next generation, Gen Z or Gen Z, if you're from the States, are at a kind of a disadvantage because of life events that they've grown up with, and how they need to be more intentional. Can you share a bit of what you were saying then?
Yeah, of course. So when I was writing my book, I kept thinking of my audience. Who would benefit the most out of those kind of, those skills that I was identifying and writing about and sharing my experience, but as well as obviously the experience of that I took from the research that I had made for my book. And it became quite apparent early on that the generation that would probably benefit the most would be the Gen Zers. So just for our audience who are not familiar with the generational demarcations, that usually Gen Z encompasses those who were born after 1996 and before 2012. Although obviously those are, just some of the standards markers. Some people sort of shift those generational brackets somewhat. But basically, generally speaking, that encompasses those who are in their teenage or later teenage years now, but have not quite reached their 30s yet.
Yeah.
So, those bulk of fairly junior to kind of, senior junior people in the workplace. So they're the people who are now creating the foundations of their professional future careers. And we know the generations that are highly ambitious. They're very focused on their professional development. They're very entrepreneurial. They also appreciate the difficulty, the financial difficulty that they're most likely to be stumbling upon in their lifetime. They want to get, the progress happen as quickly as possible. But they are naturally constrained by the formative events that shape them. The formative events mostly affect people in their sort of teenage years, especially early teens. And we know that Generation Z is the first generation that grew up with the digital devices, with the social media at their fingertips. I know obviously we have all become, or most of us have become, very familiar with social media, with, what the technology can offer. But the difference between us and them is that we came to know technology when we were adults, fully developed. Mentally developed, as well as psychologically and otherwise. But Generation Z were almost sort of like those guinea pigs when it comes to technology. So they, as much as they benefited from it, they also were at a disadvantage, because they, often their connections means that it's connecting with someone online. They have not had the same exposure to real people, in real life when it comes to the relationship building. And as you, Andrea, have very, in my mind, correctly propositioned, that the relationships is something that is created, in real life, and then you can reinforce those things in virtually, but it's not something that it's not done the other way.
Yeah.
So and that, here we have the sort of the most, the first hurdle, if you like.
So given, thank you for that. That's really great and clear how you've mapped that out there. But given that they are I want to be nice about this. I want to say a different breed or a different species almost.
Digital natives.
Digital
They're
natives.
digital natives.
There you go. What advice would you give for the Gen Zers who then need to relate? So in a workplace setting, at the moment, they're not really interacting with anybody younger than them. They're interacting with people who are, if they are, it's very much a minority. It's mostly either interacting with other Gen Zers or people who are older than them. What advice would you give to them as one question? And then behind that, what other advice would you give to the others who now need to interact with the Gen Zers? Anything on those two fronts?
Yes, because this is something that I'm constantly thinking about, talking, when I'm doing my master classes, this is exactly what I'm kind of focusing on. So as we have already said, relationship building is a skill.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it's not universally seen as an essential and a vital skill. And so this is what, part of this conversation, but it needs to be.
Yeah, agreed.
And even for the new generation, it becomes, it sort of becomes even starker just how essential it is to learn the skills. But when I was in my 20s, and I'm sure that you can relate to that, we were catapulted into the professional world. We were told to shadow, John Smith, who was inevitably 20 years older. He might not have had perfect interpersonal skills.
No.
Most likely not. And, and I actually used the male name purposefully,
That's a whole other conversation there.
The whole lot, yes, absolutely. But nonetheless, you would pick up by osmosis, if you like, by being constantly exposed to, the context, to going to meetings, to those kind of around the table conversations. You would be exposed to, what it takes to build relationships with people. As John, you correctly pointed out now, it just does not happen. A lot of Gen Zers do not have neither the confidence nor, there is no longer sort of a setting for them to be attached, if you like, to someone old and wiser who can demonstrate those skills to them. So how are they meant to learn those skills? Mm-hmm. I think by my answer to that, by taking a very purposeful approach.
Yeah.
Now, whose responsibility is that? A lot of younger people, have so many things that they kind of have on their minds right now that they probably do not quite understand the importance of learning the skills. And that is why I think it's down to the leaders, good leaders at least, to create the environments, to create settings, to set up opportunities to teach those skills. And they need to be taught in a very the manner which assumes interaction, that assumes practical involvement, that assumes constant practice. But I think that those are this now needs to be the onus is on the leadership to promote the settings where the skills are taught, learned, and practiced. And I think, generally speaking, in my mind, that kind of very purposeful approach is the only solution to this growing, potentially, actually quite detrimental to the society problem.
That is so very well put and so essential, because going back to what we said about needing to become intentional about things, the mentoring, the learning on the job, the coaching, the career development, when people are remote or hybrid, unless you're intentional about putting those things in place, because they won't happen by default, we'll miss out on all of that, and you won't have the skills being groomed there. What about, I know you mentioned digital natives, so they grew up speaking in a way that we added to the way we spoke, but for them became the only way that they spoke. What about the impact of COVID as well, and the fact that they weren't in the environments, but some people starting jobs for the first time and they were doing it remotely or in a hybrid setting? So all that induction and natural getting to know the people you need to know in the organization couldn't happen deliberately in person. How do they survive that world now online because of, what impact did COVID have, and
Huge.
how can they manage that?
Huge impact, absolutely. Huge impact exactly for that reason. Imagine you grew up being a digital native, often already not quite getting the balance right between connecting online and connecting offline. And then you're still a very naturally immature individual, say in your late teens, very early 20s, and then you are hit with a lockdown. The lockdown means that effectively you are sitting in your room with your computer,
Yeah.
For everything, for a colleague, for a friend, for, any social contact. So when I had kind of straight after COVID, when I had to deal with interns and trainees, the new influx of trainees, often I noticed that actually they even struggled with the idea of looking someone in the eye.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of, it was almost like they had a blurry picture of a person in front of them. And initially I was quite taken aback by that. And then I just thought to myself, well, of course, because they would be staring at the screen,
Mm-hmm.
they had been staring for the last 2 years. So huge impact. So first of all, just natural underdevelopment of those from the evolutionary perspective, essential skills. So it was sort of a huge dip in the development rather than a rise as naturally would be.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, a lot of them would join the workplaces either in a fully remote environment or in a hybrid environment, which meant that, again, they were not exposed to those essential water cooler moments, to those essential, observing other people, navigating social relationships. I mean, it needless to say that it would have had a profound effect on their mental health, mental health would actually be the consequence of the underdevelopment of social skills, but also actually on the future trajectory of their careers.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that, that is something we just have to take responsibility for. Are we setting our youngsters up for the careers that they would be having? Yes, they may be technologically well trained, but is that to the detriment of the training and their interpersonal skills? And my answer, I think so.
So,
Yes.
so what I'm hearing you say is, for the young people or the Generation Zers, they need to focus on relationships. They need to be intentional. Do you have any tips for them? Practical things that they can do. You need to be doing this, this, this. These are 3 things that you should really be doing out there to do that. Any thoughts on?
And the leaders, what the leaders need to put in place.
Well, we'll come to the leaders, but I want to start with the Gen Zers first, because I think they're 2 separate things that we need to look at.
Good point. Yeah.
Yes, and so with the Gen Zers, I think starting with the recognition that getting to know people offline is not the old mode of relating.
That's
not outdated.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not outdated. We often hear that Gen Z are the most connected. I love that, the most connected generation in the history of humanity. But how do you define connected?
Yeah.
They are connected insofar as they may have people that they know across the world. They've never met those people, but they're connected to them. They may in fact be meeting them online on a daily basis. For example, if they are, on social media or in other settings, but online. But to realize that connecting in person is something that actually developed out of the human race. And I strongly believe it. In fact, it's not just my belief, it's underpinned by great thinkers, from, throughout the whole history of humanity, who, said that evolutionary speaking, we have survived and thrived as species because of our social skills. Because we first and foremost, we know that connecting, again, evolutionary speaking, connecting to your tribe, staying in your tribe, developing those essential trusts, like for people, meant that you survived and thrived.
Yeah.
And, if you did not have those skills, you're most likely not going to do so well.
Yeah.
And I don't actually think things changed from an evolutionary perspective. So to answer your question, John, I think first and foremost, Gen Z need to understand that these need to be in the focus. Not only those skills ensure just good mental health, good psychological health, but also the opportunities to earn, the opportunities to expand your professional circle, opportunities to, to strengthen professional relationships, which would actually underpin your success, quite literally. Those are essential. So you realize it, put yourself out there, and then learn basic skills of talking to people. I know that, again, it might, how difficult is that to talk to people? But it can be very difficult. If you haven't, it's this, I keep saying that relating to people is, it's a social muscle. If you don't do it enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I can give you an example. There is talking with a friend of mine about a business, a home-based business that her daughter was involved in. And I said, just encourage her to pick up the phone, make a call and speak. And she was saying in their generation, you only ever message. If you pick up the phone, they'll think somebody died and it will set them into a state of anxiety. Why are you calling me? And I thought, wow, such a very different mindset and approach to how you interact with others. So your point about focusing on building that one-on-one in-person conversation skill is a real
not old or outdated
shift.
thinking.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah, it's important, and a lot of us, a lot of younger people find it quite difficult just to get over that initial hump of kind of getting to know someone. They have so much anxiety generally as a generation, anxiety about the way they come across, about the way what, what the societal anxiety, if you like, that they lose the very basic thing of paying attention, being interested in another person.
Yeah.
I know it's one of your habits, actually being curious about the other person. That is something that I found pivotal in my development in terms of kind of the relationship building.
Yeah.
I took away the focus from myself and not pay, to another person. Just being interested to learn what the other person has to say is, I think, the first skill, probably the first step in learning the skill.
We're on that page with you. That's why that's habit 1, be curious. Not
Exactly.
critical. Yeah.
Yes, because it is so very important. So being curious and also knowing, and, as any set of skills, once you know what to do in various circumstances, how do you kind of take a conversation from hello onto a certain level of like and trust? Yeah. How do you develop any conversation into somewhat kind of into a meaningful trajectory? How do you follow up? How do you wrap up any conversation? Very popular question from the younger audience. How do you follow up? All of those things have very specific answers to them.
Yeah.
So,
and what I love with the title of your book is doing it authentically, because sometimes some of the advice out there is, do this, do that, but it's very me-centered. It's about what you want to get out of them rather than genuinely building a relationship.
Absolutely. And starting with defining your own purpose. What do you want out of relationships? Do you just want to get to genuinely kind of expand your professional social circle? Kind of invest more into that social capital?
Yeah.
Do you want to find someone who can sponsor you professionally? Do you want to find someone who can mentor you? Do you want to come across more senior people, maybe, or more junior people in your industry? Decide for yourself what it is that you want out of that exercise, and it's going to make any of those efforts a lot easier, because it means that you can then go out and actually bring that level of authenticity. You're not doing it because your boss told you just go and network or, whatever, go and find more clients, but you need to have that authentic reason for establishing those relationships.
Yeah,
that's great.
The intentionality, everything you're saying, this idea of being intentional, whether you're the Gen Zer or the leader, is that what you were?
Well, I was just going to say, let's flip to the leader side now. In those organizations where it still happens to be, the leader is still not a Gen Zer, the generation before, whether they're boomers or whether they're Gen Xers or what have you. What advice to them? You're interacting with these Gen Zers now. You're interacting with these digital natives. What bit can they do to support and build a relationship there?
Well, a lot of older generations, a lot of leaders have a certain perception of the younger generation. I mean, let's face it, we all like to, or whether we like it or not, we all sometimes bias,
Yeah,
stereotypes. Yes, exactly. We impose stereotypes on people because it's easier. So it's kind of a natural thing to do. But I was at a conference recently, which was mostly for senior execs and so senior executives. So I sort of assumed that there were either very, very few or no Gen Zers. And I was sharing my views on, I mean, it was very tongue-in-cheek. And I said, is it true? I was speaking to a younger person. And I said, isn't it true that a lot of Gen Zers are professional nappers?
Nappers.
Okay.
As in, and it was done very tongue-in-cheek. We was sort of, it was a drinking sort of reception afterwards, and I just wanted a little bit of light-hearted, start light-hearted debate. Or the way I said it, some of my clients think that Gen Zers are professional nappers, which is true. Some of my clients do think that.
Yeah.
And then I saw that sort of, the look of horror on that guy's face. And then he said, well, so that I am a Gen Z. And then usually he was very, he was suited and booted and came across very professional. So actually I didn't anticipate that he was. And he said, well, I'm perfect Gen Z. I'm 26 years old. I recently became qualified as a barrister. Very difficult to do in this country. And in fact, so he also came from abroad. So I assume, English wasn't his first language, so even more difficult for him. And he said, frankly, I'm absolutely fed up with this rhetoric of, constantly bashing Gen Z. We, first of all, so to answer your question, John, I think, leaders need to understand that there is no such thing as the same Gen Zer. They are a generation that is very diverse in many ways. It's the most diverse generation in every sense. Thinking, their cultural background, their ethnical background, the way they connect to the world. So don't expect the same outcome from the same Gen Zer that you speak to. So leaders need to understand that is the generation that really does need to be approached individually. But there are unifying themes that probably do apply to the majority of them. And so taking into consideration that they are ambitious, they have those, they strive to do well, to succeed. But at the same time, leaders need to understand that there are certain things that we know that matters. That we can encourage in that generation. We know, we know just how important raising awareness and training the skills and relationship making is. Because we know that it can be your bread and butter and and jam on top. But
especially in professional services.
Absolutely, especially in professional services. So let's be very purposeful as leaders in encouraging and training those skills, understanding that that is and this is the Achilles heel of that generation. That is the one thing that, for all these reasons that we discussed today, that is the one thing that they had, been disadvantaged in their development.
And because you can see where gaps would have been created because they grew up speaking first online, and because COVID, created this remote world. But if we extrapolate on the lack of interpersonal or strong relationship skills, that's the consistent theme in a lot of the people issues that organizations have to deal with in terms of psychological safety, effective performance conversations, having honest dialogue around things that really matter. That's lacking as an expert skill at every level of the organization in every generation. So it's something that we need to be intentional about in general. How have you seen the interpersonal skills, the abilities they're impacting career progression, especially now that being remote means you're not that visible all the time for promotion opportunities?
I'm so glad that you brought that topic up, actually, because I was at a conference a couple of months ago, and one of a very senior executive from this stage announced that one of the things that became clear to her in her work is that Gen Z is full of paradoxes. They are ambitious. They are, they have every kind of desire to achieve, to progress. But when it comes to handling rejections or negative feedback, a lot of them sometimes a lot of them fall apart. There is this paradox of kind of pushing on, but lacking resilience in many ways.
Yeah.
And actually, feedbacking is a very good example, because in order to be good at both giving and receiving feedback, you have to know how to relate to another person.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about accepting criticism or accepting praise, actually. It's about knowing how to, converse with another person. It's knowing how to listen.
Yeah.
It's knowing how to deliver your point eloquently, accurately, but also without without offending or hurting someone, and also without taking too many things personally. So actually, that's feedback is one of those elements that is currently impacting, or difficulty with receiving and giving feedback is hugely impacting professional development of the new generation. And I have a very personal example. I was a partner at the firm, and I was conducting my first feedbacking session with a new intern, or trainee rather. And so because it was the first one, it was kind of scheduled to last no more than 10 minutes. And I spent the first 8 minutes giving him the feedback on his work to date. And then I sort of glanced at my watch and I said, look, I have a client coming in a couple of minutes. Do you have any kind of feedback to me? I mean, he'd already kind of asked me certain questions, but I said, is there anything that you'd like to feedback? And to be honest, I expected that the answer would be no, but thank you very much for your time. I'm learning so much. I'm really grateful for your expertise. But no, so he opens up his notepad and he said, well, I'm glad you asked because there are quite a few things here that I would like to feedback on the way that this company is run. And I remember being absolutely lost for words, thinking, well, I'm sorry, but you simply have not, you have not gained the right to feedback. You're way too junior. You spend 5 minutes in the company, So, but I think and that was sort of one of those waking, moments for me when I realized, well, actually, in his mind, he has something to
100%.
say. But whether he's saying it correctly, whether he has chosen the moment right, whether he's presenting those things, well, that's a completely different matter.
Yeah.
And as a leader, you feel affected by those kind of dynamics, of course.
On both sides, we need to get better at feedback. Gen Z, Gen X, boomers, all the way. And it goes back to your point about, for personal reasons and for professional development in particular, interpersonal skills has to be on the agenda as an essential. We've kind of spoken about what Gen Zers have been lacking because they're digital natives. Before we wrap up, what do they bring because they're digital natives? Because there's a wealth of skill and ability and things that they are very comfortable in. What have you seen that they bring in communication space because they're digital natives?
And of course, their knowledge of technology is completely, out of this world. It's, we are constantly going to be catching up with them rather than the other way around. For them, technology is the extension of them rather than something that they learn, for example, as I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that has tremendous effect on, well, it's actually, it's a huge gift to us as leaders. But also they do have a different view of the world. That idea of being the most diverse generation is, in our world that is still very much held by all stereotypes and biases, that idea, that needs to inject the professional world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And many, many aspects of the professional world really suffer hugely. And I speak with, full authority, having been in the legal world, very undiverse section of the legal world for over 20 years. So I would love for the leaders to encompass that, natural diversity that generation bring into the professional environment, as well as their technical capabilities, their technical knowledge, and also, that kind of being able to see things slightly kind of laterally, thinking out of the box. A lot of them they come into the professional world knowing that they're not going to be staying in the same profession or in the same industry for the next 20, 30 years. They want to think they know to to think creatively, to kind of think ambitiously, to utilize various kind of modes that, social media and, technology and in real life events. So let's bring in all of that creativity and ambition and kind of the new ways of thinking of the new generation, but help them. And I do truly believe that generations that would have every opportunity to become one of the greatest generations.
Indeed,
Only if we help them to kind of to develop that relationship building element that they naturally missed out on. But if we help them to do that, then they have, incredible chances to really shine in life.
That's an amazing point to make.
And I think I love the question that you asked there, which is around what can we learn from them, or what else do they have to add? And what I heard you saying in there, what it filtered down to me, is they have this amazing gift or the ability to overlook difference because they're just used to difference. They're just such a diverse generation as they are. For them, difference is natural.
Exactly.
To the older generations, difference was not so normal.
So rather than overlook, to really embrace it,
to make
it work for them. They think more globally. They expect us to be more diverse, and they certainly, as you say, bring such a richer perspective to problem solving and innovating. But your point about, so therefore it's imperative that we support them in building the relational skills so that they can really thrive. That's such a great note. I'm conscious of the time. I didn't realize, that we're blown past.
As we thought, we could just keep talking. We could just keep going.
Is there anything that we've not discussed, not been able to touch on yet, that you'd love to just share? Points to remember, things to act on before we wrap up?
Well, I think actually, thanks to the two of you, this conversation, I think, touched on so many aspects that are connected to different generations, to the relationship. But perhaps just to conclude, just to bring back, us back to those, the 3 points that are important for all of us to remember. So seeing the world as constantly moving and dynamic, I mean, it's only a good thing. But there are certain events that happen in the world that constrain in some ways the development of the newest generation in the workplace, Generation Z. But because we are embracing for the first time actually in the human history, the workplace where we have up to 5 generations working together. Let's make sure that we give that newest generation the best opportunities ever. Let's bring all of those skills that are natural to us, that we have developed, that we had to develop to them. And let's work to create a better, intergenerationally better workplace that is bound to benefit each and every one of us.
Yeah.
I think that's, that's kind of the point. And finally to say, and I absolutely love the point that John just made, it's that this is the generation that sees the world naturally as a kind of as the diverse world.
Mm.
Yeah.
We no longer really need to explain to them why diversity matters, why
exactly.
because
Exactly right. Yeah.
we actually, it's a given.
Yeah.
But there is just so much to take away from that and to learn. So it's the kind of the mutual learning mechanism. But again, how do we learn mutually? Through connecting.
Through connecting,
Through
through
those strong relationships. So it goes the full circle back to the importance of having strong relationships.
Yeah.
And doing that in the professional world through great networking. The title of a certain book somebody's written, I think.
So let's see the book again, Alisa.
Thank you.
And how do people get the book? And how do people find out more about you and the work that you're doing, if you'd like to share that?
So the book can be found in all of the best bookshops as well as online on Amazon. In fact, you'll be the first people for me to share that I'm currently in kind of working on the second edition of the book, and which is going to encompass a chapter specifically dedicated to things that we discussed today, to the kind of intergenerational work and focusing on Generation Z. I also have my website. It's very straightforward, alisagrafton.com. I have a weekly, I try to make it weekly podcast, weekly newsletter on LinkedIn called Connecting with Generation Z, where I try and share my experiences on different aspects of relationship making, professional world, and sort of around the topic of Generation Z. And I also do my kind of couple of times a week, I post videos on networking, on developing networking skills, of different aspects of networking skills. They're very sort of brief, under 2 minutes videos on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Instagram and great.networking on Instagram. So yes, there are various avenues, and would be wonderful to get connected with as many members of your audience as possible.
Well, we'll put those links in the show notes, but it's been great having your insights, your input. I think
your energy, just your passion, to know that we certainly are on the same page with the passion for building interpersonal skills, relationship skills as a foundation, as an essential for life.
Well, it's been my pleasure. I really enjoyed my time on your wonderful podcast.
Wonderful. Well,
thank you for joining us.
With that, I think it's a wrap.
It's a wrap.
We say thank you to Alisa, but thank you to our audience for joining us yet again. Another great episode. I think, what are we up to about? Well, we're up in the late 40s or 50s in terms of episodes now. We got to check out the exact number, but it's all these conversations are such fun.
We learn, and
we're learning,
we enjoy
and
the conversations.
We're helping our audience to learn. So it's been great. Thank you, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
See you next time.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, and you want to hear more, the best thing to do is subscribe. Then you'll never miss an episode. There's a new one every Friday. You can stay connected with us on social media at The 4 Habits for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and to participate in discussions related to the show. We always love to hear from you. And of course, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on your preferred platform, to allow us to reach more listeners and help people around the globe radically transform the way they do relationships, so they too can enjoy better harmony at home, thrive at work, and win at life.